Please welcome Omar Jassel, Senior Lead Engineer at Booz Allen Hamilton, and Jake Marullo, Head of OT Security at Toyota. Omar and Jake will be presenting Enabling Cybersecurity for Agile Manufacturing.
Yep. Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Hey.
Thank you for joining us today. And we're very excited here to talk to you guys about some of the things that we learned about enabling cybersecurity for agile manufacturing. This is a topic that Jake and I are pretty passionate about, and we're really excited to come kind of speak to you guys to some of the learnings and approaches we've taken. So before we get started, we wanted to share with you guys this quote from Amit Zaveri from Google Cloud, Head of Platform. And it really embodies what our talk is going to be about today. And he says that think of digital transformation less as a technology project to be finished than as a state of perpetual agility, always ready to evolve for whatever customers want next. And if you follow that path, you'll be on the right path to be able to adapt to any changes that come. So I think this really speaks into the heart of agile manufacturing. And as we go through the presentation, we'll cover what is agile, why do we need it, and also what are some learnings that we can do from a cybersecurity standpoint to be able to kind of walk hand in hand in terms of transforming your manufacturing operations and embed that security or cybersecurity focus while you do that process. So a little bit about ourselves. I'll start and kick it off to Jake. So my name is Omar Jassel. I'm a lead associate with Booz Allen Hamilton in the OT cybersecurity space. And actually my career started as a control system engineer a couple years ago, and eventually I made the pivot into cybersecurity and haven't looked back. So pretty excited to be in this space. I think it's an exciting and changing space that you're always continuously learning. And yeah, pretty excited to be here with you guys.
Thanks, Omar. Hey, I'm Jake Marullo. I lead the OT cybersecurity team for Toyota North America, also leading our cyber efforts for the battery plant build-out and our manufacturing digital transformation cyber team. Been at Toyota for about a year now. Before that was at Rivian and some other time in the energy industry and government.
Awesome. So let's talk about consumers. Let's start off with that. So we know that consumer needs, they're always going to change. Change is a constant of life. And there's different factors that are driving why, customers are changing, their demands of what products they want. One of them is having industry players such as, Amazon that are coming into the space and disrupting a specific industry, right? In this case, the logistics, the supply chain, the, straight to consumer platform. So, they were really disruptors, right? So we're starting to see a lot more of these companies coming in and just disrupting, these markets that have been pretty stagnant for a while. We also have new technology, right? We're seeing a lot more of AI, machine learning, kind of embedding themselves into manufacturing operations for a lot of things, right? When Jake and I go to, different engagements, we start seeing hear a lot more about ChatGPT, and it's interesting to see. But we also have, a lot of startups coming into this OT security space that are really, it's interesting to see kind of the different perspectives that they bring to the table on how to solve this challenge of securing manufacturing. So we have all those players, and we also have consumers of different generations just having competing expectations of what they expect of the products they procure. So kind of 5 of the key items that we're kind of seeing recently that consumers want from manufacturers, it's really about improved quality. They really want manufacturers to stand behind their product, have less recalls, have no defects in terms of functionality, safety. They also want more personalization. They want to be able to customize and make that product that they're buying their own, right? Whether that be being able to choose from different models, color, specific functionality. They just want to feel like that product was meant for them. We also see customers wanting to be part of that feedback loop of what comes next, right? You have a lot of places where customers can provide feedback, comments on what they expect the next iteration of a product to be. You also have, as you guys are aware, sustainability. There's a huge focus on sustainability from not just a raw material, like what it takes to make a product, but also how are you producing it? Are you using clean energy? Are you using any kind of wind, solar, those kind of energies to try to make not just the product, but the production process more sustainable? And lastly, I did mention Amazon, faster acquisition. People expect things a lot faster. They want to click a button, and within an hour, they expect something at their door, right, or a day. So it's really kind of changed how we do or think about being more agile to be able to kind of address some of these needs that consumers are challenging manufacturers to solve. So how do we do this, right? So consumer needs are changing, but to be able to adapt to this constant change, we need to be more agile, and we need to actually evolve from this kind of way of doing things that we call plans of the past, right? Which is really what we're doing now. Plans of the past are very rigid. We don't have a lot of synchronization. We have very rigid production lines, that manufacture one thing at a time. We also have not a lot of communication between different shop floors to have that synchronized operation. So with that being said, you guys are all aware of the current, risks that we see kind of in manufacturing today. And you can see some like, we have legacy systems, systems that are no longer supported that, we have to buy at eBay and we can't verify if they're, counterfeit or they've been tampered with. We also have some gaps in visibility into the OT environment, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see that so those are the common risks that we want to make sure we account for as we transform our operation into a more agile one. So definitely something that as we start building out and doing that transformation, let's keep these in mind so that we can make sure we mitigate those or find a way to overcome some of these.
So I'll talk a little bit here. What we are seeing at Toyota, and we do things at pretty big scale, we are seeing the need for a lot of OT devices being required to be connected either to the network via Wi-Fi or LTE or hardwired. With that brings a lot of challenges because a lot of these devices, they're not meant to connect to a network and have any sort of data pulling or telemetry requirements and stuff like that. So we're seeing a significant amount of assets being connected to the network. It's challenging from a cyber perspective because, for example, robots and robot arms and their controllers that go with them don't necessarily have security in mind. So OpenFTP, insecure port 80, stuff like that. So it brings a challenge from the cyber perspective because now we have to understand what that increased attack surface looks like and how we protect those. And we kind of work our way down the maturity scale. So if we don't have the ability to place active security controls on these devices, what we are then able to do is really carry the message along about, well, now we have to monitor that piece of equipment. And we got to monitor it for not only baseline comms, but also, from an asset visibility and asset lifecycle perspective, what that asset is, what software it's running, and then what associated vulnerabilities are with it. So we've had some challenges, certainly with that, and I think a lot of organizations, at scale are trying to solve those similar problems. So. We're also seeing the appeal of shifting operations to the cloud. However, from a cyber resilience perspective, that doesn't always make sense. We try to drive the message about, what happens if your plant loses connectivity, what happens in the event that somebody cuts your internet connection and then comes and steals the cable that they ran to replace that internet connection. That's a true story, by the way. So we're challenged with a lot of things, and driving it from a cyber resilience perspective, I think really puts all of those different things together, on that slide. Omar, you got anything to add?
No, I think the only thing I'll add is, what we're seeing is, Jake hit it, kind of what this all means. And some of the key outcomes to highlight is, in order to enable that agility and everything that Jake just mentioned, we're trying to also run a business, right? So we're trying to have some key outcomes from a business perspective, which are, going back to the 5 things that we mentioned at the beginning, reducing scrap, reducing inventory costs, right, to be able to run the business, improve product quality. So again, manufacturers stand behind their product, and again, process reliability and speed to market. So definitely all those encompassing the new technologies and some key outcomes of what we want to accomplish with agile manufacturing. So kind of expanding, for what Jake was mentioning, we can break down some of the characteristics of agile manufacturing into 5 kind of broad categories. Obviously, it's not exhaustive, but we try to make it a good summary of what are some of those characteristics, right? And you can see that the first one is really about manufacturing operations. If we want to be agile, we need to be streamlined. We need to have an operation that's very synchronized and streamlined. And so what that means, you'll have kind of, more use of predictive maintenance, right? We want to be more proactive about maintenance tasks versus waiting for something to break down and then taking your production line down. We also want to make sure that as we're extracting more data, we're installing sensors, we're installing edge computing, and we're extracting data from the systems on the shop floor, that we can develop analytics, right, to try to more anticipate, again, going back to predictive maintenance, but also from a planning perspective. How do I plan my production runs so that I know that I'm available, or my uptime is as high as possible, right? We also have inventory management, and this goes back to the inventory costs of running a business, right? We want to make sure we're synchronized with our supply chain so that whenever we need the raw materials, they arrive, just in time. We don't want, inventory to be sitting on the drop lot or even within the manufacturing site, just because every square inch of a plant floor is precious. So again, so we see a lot of inventory management, more smart devices to track the inventory throughout the production process. And then product quality, right? Incorporating more advanced quality inspection systems so that, the end product does not come with any defects that, the consumers will be able to see, right? Or impact the way the consumers view the product. So we're seeing a lot more of those advanced quality inspections. We see videos, camera-based systems are becoming so popular to be able to catch these defects that maybe the human eye can't. So a lot of data processing and decision-making happening on the shop floors. And then we move on to HS&E, right? And here is more on the sustainability piece where we have more, a more concerted effort to really monitor our energy usage. So installing sensors at different points and really being conscious about, are we utilizing the energy in the most efficient way? And what is that number, right? And then the last piece is really about facilities and utilities. We're seeing a lot more, I feel like, and Jake can probably agree with me, like building control systems and utilities are always the forgotten, systems on a plant floor. We really focus on what drives the business, and these, support systems usually don't get the attention from a cybersecurity standpoint that they need. So we're seeing that change, actually. We're seeing a lot more of that integrated, a lot more of, applying those cybersecurity mindset in facilities and utilities, and that means more sensors, more, again, predictive maintenance of your compressors, your boilers, and other utilities, and being more energy efficient with even your HVAC, right? Having smart lighting, automated thermostat settings for if no one's in a room or after hours and things like that. So, we're seeing a lot of those characteristics really being driven by organizations trying to drive towards agile manufacturing.
So, a key component of that there is that manufacturing operations tower. From a predictive maintenance and machine reliability standpoint, that's what's driving, in our opinion, a lot of the smart and agile manufacturing requirements. And again, with that comes the requirement to connect pieces of equipment to a network that were never designed to be connected to a piece, to that network. So we're looking at it in innovative ways. Of course, from an inventory management standpoint, we want to know, like I said, what's out there, what software it's running, what hardware it is. And then from the product quality standpoint, I think that's what's also going to drive, to Omar's point, a lot of what we typically don't see in manufacturing, which is high bandwidth requirements, vision systems, and things like that. So trying to keep up with that demand, I think, is pretty challenging.
No, well said. So we talked about why we need Agile and a little bit of what it is. So now let's talk about a little bit of cybersecurity. And I'll be honest with you guys, there's no silver bullet. Every organization is different. A cybersecurity program needs to be tailored to the different organizations, and we really need to encompass not just the technology, we also need to encompass the people side of things, the right capabilities and the right process and standards that need to be followed to make sure that we have a good cyber, hygiene, cyber culture or cyber aware culture within the organization. So with Jack and I, as we we're looking through, how do we enable cybersecurity? We don't have kind of a magic list for you guys. You still have to do your defense in depth. You still have to do things like secure remote access. But what we wanted to highlight with you guys today is, what are some things that are, I won't say quick wins, but something that we can focus on that can make sure that that cybersecurity is actually kind of step in step with the transformation of your operations into a more agile operation. And so as we kind of looked at, what are some of those things that we could do to really help drive the cyber side of things, we came up with these 5, and the first one is really about having the initial buy-in, making sure that from a cybersecurity standpoint, we're transparent. We're engaging the relevant stakeholders so they're aware of what we're doing, right, and why it's important. I feel like without that one, it's always a battle to fight with the different stakeholders. So having that initial buy-in is important. And it really comes down to a lot of, I think in our case, what really works is having that face-to-face time, and building those relationships helps go a long way. The other thing, too, is having a strong foundation on security governance and culture, right? Security governance and culture will really help accelerate the transition from, hey, I'm doing some transformative, I'm going through this transformation journey, and taking it over to kind of an operate and maintain, right? How do we take that and make it sustainable? And without that foundation, it's very difficult to kind of take that and make sure that it sticks through years to come. So having that foundation was critical, as well as that buy-in from people, process, and technology. But from a technology standpoint, we can also focus on secure remote access. That's another big thing that we want to make sure that as we are working with third parties, that if there's legitimate use cases for them to access our network, that they have the means to do it in a secure fashion. And that could be things like vendors doing support of a piece of equipment that they manage. The other one is really about synchronization, right? We talked about just-in-time delivery of raw materials. So having supply chain risk management framework in place to see how do you talk or how do you engage with your third parties is critical, especially as we're doing a lot more data sharing among entities to be able to have that end-to-end synchronized supply chain. And lastly, it's really about having this mentality of secure by design. So adopting the best-in-class standards that are out there to give you those, to leverage those security frameworks to be able to design and engineer and implement your technologies for agile manufacturing in a way that always keeps security at the forefront.
So what's unique about the automotive industry is that we often retool our lines, which means we change the equipment out for a new model or something similar to that. To Omar's point, where we've had a lot of successes building in secure by design, but you can't do that without the initial buy-in and the relationships that we've built with a lot of our business partners at Toyota. It's pretty awesome. The other piece is the supply chain risk management. So we've really looked at that in a different way. I think automotive is unique in the sense that every vehicle we produce, in some cases, has over 1,000 suppliers or vendors for that one vehicle. So we've got a significant surface of stuff that we have to deal with on the supply chain side. So we've looked at that from a different perspective and said, well, bring us in early and we can help manage some of the risk with some of these suppliers. And we've had some really, really good suppliers that are really mature in their cyber process and cyber journey, and it's been really great to work with them. And we're trying to bring the other vendors up to speed too as well.
Cool. You want to speak a little bit on?
Yeah. So back to the initial buy-in. What we found works the best is building relationships with the business. And what I mean by the business is in cyber and OT cyber in specific, we've got to work with so many different folks. And we've been really successful and saw a lot of results out of initially building those relationships with a lot of the different teams. For example, on our manufacturing side, we've partnered with a lot of the manufacturing business orgs to actually raise awareness about cyber and talk to them about why it's important. And what's happened because of that is now we have a voice on our manufacturing side saying cyber is important, right? We need to bring these guys in. We need to get their input on what we're doing, and we're trying to scale that program. But we've seen a lot of success coming out of that relationship building internal.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think, what you see on the bottom, awareness campaign is important, right? To be able to talk the same language. To Jake's point, kind of coming together and being able to understand and get at the same level is important to be able to communicate what we're trying to do. So after we have that buy-in, another key focus areas for us that we found was important is that foundational OT governance framework. And we're not asking you guys to start this from scratch. Usually your organization already has something, and we just need to make sure we integrate or complement the existing governance framework and add that OT flair, that uniqueness of the OT environment into the existing one. And sometimes it's that exercise of understanding who are the stakeholders, who needs to talk to who, right? Who's the decision maker, and what are those standards and policies that need to be built for OT that exist in enterprise, but we really can't do the same things in enterprise on the OT side that we can do on enterprise. So think of patch management. We can't do patch Tuesdays every month, right? So what does that look like for the OT, and what's acceptable to the organization in terms of the risk appetite? So from a governance framework, is establishing who the people are, the roles and responsibilities. What is that communication among the different committees to make sure that there's somebody from OT cybersecurity on those critical steering committees that can embed kind of what is the risk, why is it important, and make sure that they're driving the path forward on priorities from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so what you get from that is having that stakeholder alignment. But that stakeholder alignment needs to, you need to be able to have a couple components of your framework to be able to get that alignment. And you see that it starts with the policy, and you guys are familiar with policies, but having something that's OT specific that can really drive the point, because the last thing you want is to have a policy that's not relevant or it doesn't apply to OT, and then you just cause confusion. So making sure you have a security policy that's tailored for OT and that can be disseminated through the organization. You also need the security awareness approach. Like, why are we doing this? Why are you making my job difficult, right? We need to be able to answer that question from a security awareness, from an OT security awareness standpoint. And, there's different ways to do that, but, and it varies by organization. But having a campaign that can really articulate why we're doing this, right? It's not to make your job more difficult, but it's to protect the business. And lastly, security standards. What are we measured against, right? We can't be measured against standards for enterprise, so having OT-specific standards that can be applied to systems that we see on the shop floor. And lastly, security patterns as well. That every manufacturing site is different, so we need to make sure that everything's tailored. And sometimes a one-size-fits-all doesn't work, right? Especially in manufacturing. So being able to have the flexibility and those security patterns defined, so that you can still have the cybersecurity, controls in place and not hinder the operation.
Yeah, definitely, and all those are really important. I would say standards and patterns are critical, as well as policy, but security awareness, right? That is, for us, very important, because it's not an easy thing to do in manufacturing, is to have a effective security awareness program. So we're starting to see some pretty good benefits out of that too as well. So some simple things like, hey, don't pick up that USB drive in the parking lot and plug it into your Windows computer, right? Things like that, but also having the buy-in, again, from the manufacturing side to allow us or let us come in and build these programs around their manufacturing operations.
Cool. And then we move on to secure remote access. We want to make sure that we can enable the business to still produce what we need to do, right? And so that means that we can't have the approach of we're going to cut off access to the manufacturing network. That's not going to work. There's the legitimate use cases out there, and we need to make sure that we communicate what those are. Because as soon as you can define why folks, third parties, or even folks within the organization need access to the manufacturing environment, then you can start figuring out what is the best approach that you can deploy, or you can you can start, evaluating to be able to secure that connectivity from outside into your manufacturing. And one thing that we're seeing a lot more of is, we all know about VPNs, and that opened up your network, pretty much your entire network for the most part. So having solutions that are more tailored to where you can have remote access to not just the whole network, but specific systems that you need access, right? I don't need my boiler maintenance person to have access to my robots. So how do we segment that access and do it in a way that, first of all, you get access to what you need, and also it's initiated by the manufacturing side. You don't want ad hoc connections coming from outside. You want everything to be initiated from inside the plant from a security standpoint, just because that gives the plant control of what's happening and who's ingress into the environment. And then we talk about synchronized supply chain. This goes back to just operational efficiencies, right? And two things that we want to kind of foot stomp here is really working with your third-party vendors, right? And making sure that as you work with them, you define what are your cybersecurity requirements. We're seeing a lot more of this where, contracts between organizations or between, entities, have now cybersecurity language just to make sure that, you're not exposing yourself, from a third party if that third party gets compromised. So we're seeing a lot more of that kind of requirements and language to try to understand that you're not just a supplier to me, you're part of my supply chain, and I want to have good confidence that you're protecting your environment, so that when you do go down, you don't take my production down as well. And then also it's about procurement, right? When I procure equipment, I want to make sure that I have listed there controls and other language that vendors of different products can adhere to, so that when I bring stuff products into my environment, I'm not introducing additional risk. So this becomes critical just to make sure that, and you guys know all about supply chain issues. So this helps protect and add that layer a little bit of layer of protection from a cybersecurity standpoint to make sure that all my third parties and other entities have good cyber hygiene in their organizations, and they're not going to expose my business to something. And lastly, we go back to kind of Jake's point on secure by design, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of smart people out there that came up with great standards, great frameworks, and really it's about, as you work on this transformation to agile manufacturing and you adopt new technologies, you engineer, you design, you implement, you take a look at, what do you do? How can I make sure from a cloud security standpoint that anything that leverages the cloud is secure? From an application security, whether I buy an application from, off the shelf or I design it in-house, am I following, secure development lifecycle strategies or frameworks, or am I, having those cybersecurity requirements from third parties, from vendors embedded into the contract? And also the data, right? As we're seeing a lot more data being generated, how do I protect it? So having those three frameworks from a cloud, from an application security, and from a data security, helps make sure that anything we deploy or we, into our environment actually has some kind of cybersecurity, embedded into the design of that. So this again helps make sure that we stay on top of, deploying the advanced, these advanced technologies, but also, that we have the confidence that we follow the framework that, incorporates security at every step of the way. And it gives us that little confidence that, we won't be opening up additional risks into our business. Anything you want to add here?
Yeah, data security is huge for us. The whole point of, in my opinion, smart and agile manufacturing and connecting a bunch of equipment is pulling telemetry and data from that equipment. So the resulting data from that becomes pretty enormous. So that's one of our key focus areas right now, and smart and agile manufacturing is, especially the other ones, but data security in particular.
Awesome. And with that, guys, thank you very much. I think we probably have a minute for questions, if you guys have any. Yes.
So with respect to your last comment about the data security and focusing on the condition monitoring of your equipment, are you finding situations where your team is able to leverage the same data that the vendors are trying to pull from you so that they can try to be, proactive and help you? Are you guys able to centralize that and use it as well?
Definitely. We definitely see the requirement from vendors for the data that we're pulling, but also in some cases, we want the data, but only the vendor has it, for example, because of the way they build their closed loop system. So we have to go to the vendor essentially and request that information from them, but it's a combination of both.
Cool. Thank you guys so much.